Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is breathe. Let's take a moment to look at some definitions or ways that you might hear this verb used. The most common way to hear the verb breathe used is to refer to that action of taking air into one's lungs and then expelling it or pushing it out through your nose, through your mouth. A second way some people use the verb breathe is to refer to the action of being alive. A third way breathe gets used is to mean to admit or emit air or moisture. Sometimes you hear clothing described with this particular verb. So talking about its ability to have sort of air or water kind of pass through it, not stay trapped inside. A fourth way you'll hear breathe used is to mean to pause and rest before continuing. A fifth way the verb breathe gets used is to mean to utter, to say something. And it's most common to hear this particular meaning used in a negative way, perhaps with an imperative like, don't breathe a word of this, right? So here someone is telling you, don't say anything. You should know that breathe is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, you need to drop the E before adding ing. That forms breathing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by just adding the letter D, since this verb already ends in an E. Our base verb, breathe, the, ends in a voiced TH sound. So our past tense ending is going to make a D sound. It should sound like this: breathed, breathed. Okay. Now, there are a couple phrasal verbs you might hear with breathe. We're going to talk about the first two together, breathe in and breathe out. So in would be the action of inhaling, taking air into your body, and then exhaling would be pushing it out. So you might hear this verb used when you're visiting a doctor. So the doctor might talk to a patient and say, breathe in slowly. Right? So they want, right, that action. Okay. And then the doctor might say, now breathe out. Right. Push the air out. A third phrasal verb you might hear is to breathe on. So the way this gets used is someone is exhaling onto someone or something. Perhaps you've heard kids say something like, Mom, he's breathing on me. So you have maybe an annoying sibling trying to bother by like being too close and perhaps kind of pushing air out onto their sibling. Now, let's talk about using our verb of the day, breathe, to talk about ability. Today, we're going to talk about past ability, present ability, and future ability. And with all of these different ways to talk about ability, we're going to have sort of two forms. So what you're going to see is a modal and then a base verb, or you're going to see be able to and a base verb. So with all of these, that is going to be our pattern or our structure. So with all of these, we're not adding any special endings to our verb. So in the past tense, if I want to talk about someone's past ability to do a particular action, I will use the modal could. Okay? Or my other option is to use a past form of be, so that's going to be was or were. Then I use able to and the base verb. And another thing to sort of mention here, whether I use a modal or whether I use be able to, my meaning is the same. Okay, so here's an affirmative example. She could breathe on her own, or she was able to breathe on her own, meaning we didn't need a machine or some type of assistance in order to have that process of inhale, exhale. Now, if I would want to make this negative, I'm going to insert not after my modal or not after my be verb. Here's another set of examples. The patient couldn't breathe. The patient wasn't able to breathe. Okay. Now, if I want to ask yes or no questions, I'm going to change the order. So I can start with my modal, then have my subject, then the base verb. Or I can use a past form of be, the subject, and then able to, and the base verb. Here's another set of examples. Could they breathe after the race? Were they able to breathe after the race? So maybe we have a set of runners who have pushed themselves so hard they are struggling with that process of inhale, exhale. Now let's talk about present ability. Okay? We're going to change our modal from could in the past to can, C-A-N, but then our patterns are going to be the same here. And then with be able to, now I'm going to use a present form of be. So that's am, is, or are. Let's take a look at the affirmative examples. These animals can breathe underwater. These animals are able to breathe underwater. Both have the same meaning. In the negative, I'll insert not after can or not after am, is, or are. An example here. I can't breathe with all this smoke. I'm not able to breathe with all this smoke. Okay. And then finally, we can do yes or no questions. Start with our modal, then our subject, then the base verb, or start with the be verb, then our subject, then able to, and the base verb. Here are two more examples. Can you breathe? Are you able to breathe? Now let's talk about future ability. We're going to use the same modal can to talk about one's ability to do an action in the future. And then our second way will be to use will be able to and the base verb. Let's take a look at two more examples. This clothing can breathe well in hot conditions. This clothing will be able to breathe well in hot conditions. So again, kind of this idea of like air is going to be passed through, it's not going to be trapped and make you even warmer or hotter. If I want to talk about the negative, one's negative ability in the future, again, I can put not after my modal or not after will. Here are two more examples. We can't breathe with a small lead. We won't be able to breathe with a small lead. And then finally, yes or no questions. Again, we'll follow the same pattern of having our modal, then our subject, then the base verb, or we'll use will, then the subject, then be able to, and the base verb. Here's our last set of examples. Can the magician breathe in that container? Will the magician be able to breathe in that container? So here, maybe we're kind of wondering how a certain trick is going to be performed. Now, let's take a moment to look at some words and some phrases that connect to our verb breathe. And the first word we're going to look at is the noun breath. Generally, when you hear this used, we're talking about an inhalation or exhalation of air from one's lungs. An example of this might be, take a few breaths to relax. Okay? And I should probably point out with the pronunciation of this, you're going to notice the vowel sound has changed. So we went from a long sound to a short sound. And the TH sound also changed when we dropped the E on the ending. So breath has an unvoiced TH sound. A second way you might hear this noun breath used is to refer to a brief moment. An example of this, can you believe they completed it in a breath? So again, meaning something happened pretty quickly. Another related word that you might hear is the adjective breathtaking. This is used to describe something that astonishes you, surprises you, or maybe it just fills you with awe. We can say this kind of like, wow, that type of feeling. So we're describing the quality of something as being incredibly awesome, that maybe for a moment, right, it took your breath away. So an example of how you might use this, and I've got a picture here to help illustrate. This past summer, as I was traveling, I saw this just incredibly beautiful lake. It's called Lake Pito in Alberta, Canada, and it is truly breathtaking. Right? The colors around it are so unique. I've never seen anything quite as blue as this particular lake was. I've got a little picture there on the right side of your screen if you're curious. So that was my example sentence. Lake Pito in Alberta, Canada is breathtaking. Now let's talk about a phrase you might hear. The phrase is "don't hold your breath." And again, most common to hear this used in a negative way, and people use it to express that something is very unlikely to happen, or it's unlikely to happen soon. Maybe it'll be a long, long time. So the idea here is, right, don't hold your breath because you want to continue breathing and living. So you might hear it used sort of this way in a conversation. So one person might ask, do you think the city will fix this street soon? And somebody who's very pessimistic, right, doesn't think it's going to happen, would say, don't hold your breath, right? So meaning not soon. Maybe it'll be a few years before this, whatever it is, gets repaired. Another phrase you might hear is to breathe easy. An example or the meaning here is we're encouraging someone to feel relaxed, maybe feel relieved, and we typically use this after some stressful period. I've got an example here. The accountants could breathe easy after the fall tax deadlines. This was my former profession, and I know September, October tax deadlines tended to be extremely stressful, long work hours. And so once you get past that deadline, right, you can relax a bit, and generally people felt extremely relieved. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.